In 1944, the United States government printed millions of pamphlets teaching ordinary families how to preserve meat that would last 60 years. No refrigerator, no electricity, no chemicals, salt, fat, and a glass jar. That is not speculation. Museum specimens of Civil War hardtack, made with the same principles, are still intact after more than 150 years. You can visit them, you can see them behind glass. They are older than your great-grandparents, and they have not rotted. Now consider this. The global processed food industry earns trillions of dollars every single year, selling you shelf life measured in weeks. These 4 techniques cost pennies per pound. They deliver shelf life measured in decades. The industry did not outperform these methods. It replaced the people who knew them. By the end of this video, you will know how to execute all 4 wartime preservation methods: pemmican, hardtack, salt curing, lard-sealed canning, using ingredients from any grocery store, with no power, no special equipment, and no permission from anyone. So why don't you know this? That is the part worth paying attention to. Welcome back. If you are new here, this channel exists for one reason: to recover the practical knowledge that was stripped from public education and buried under a consumer economy that profits from your dependence. Every video on this channel is built on primary sources: government documents, military records, peer-reviewed science. We do not sensationalize, we do not guess. And when we are uncertain, we tell you. If that sounds like something worth protecting, subscribe. Not for me, for the information. Because algorithms bury what industries do not want amplified. Your subscription is not support for a creator. It is a vote to keep suppressed knowledge visible. One more thing before we begin. This video will be honest about the risks. Botulism is real. Improper technique can be dangerous. We will cover that directly, not hide from it. You deserve the full picture, not just the parts that sound exciting. Now, let us start with the history they left out of every textbook you were ever handed. The Cree and Métis peoples of the North American plains made pemmican for centuries before any European set foot on the continent. Lean bison meat, dried until brittle, pounded into powder, mixed with rendered fat. Stored in rawhide parfleche bags, it sustained entire nations through winters that would kill an unprepared person in hours. Fur traders and Arctic explorers adopted it because nothing else worked. Pemmican caches buried in Arctic conditions have been documented as viable after 50 years. Not in a laboratory. In frozen ground, across the Atlantic. Roman legions carried bucelatum, a twice-baked grain ration so dry and dense it survived months of marching in leather satchels through rain, heat, and dust. It was not a luxury, it was infrastructure. The Roman military machine ran on preserved grain the way modern armies run on diesel. Jump forward. The Vikings salted fish and meat for ocean crossings that lasted weeks in open boats with no refrigeration of any kind. Salt cod became the economic backbone of entire colonial economies. The Portuguese, the Basques, the British. Nations were built on the ability to preserve protein with nothing but sodium chloride and air. Now the American Civil War. Hardtack was issued to Union and Confederate soldiers by the millions of units. Flour, water, salt, baked until every trace of moisture was gone. Soldiers complained about it. They broke teeth on it. And specimens from the 1860s are still sitting in museum display cases. 150 years later, intact. Then came the Second World War. And this is where the story shifts from ancient tradition to official government policy. The United States Department of Agriculture printed preservation guides and distributed them to millions of households. The British Ministry of Food ran radio broadcasts, posters, and community workshops teaching civilians to salt, cure, dry, and seal food at home. Extension agents from land-grant universities went door to door. Victory Garden programs were not just about growing food, they were about preserving it. This was not alternative knowledge. This was not fringe survival fantasy. This was official government policy, taught by trained agents, backed by printed federal documents, deployed to millions of American and British families during a global crisis. 4 techniques, exposed to centuries of field testing, exposed to the harshest conditions on Earth. And they worked. So what happened next is the part that should make you uncomfortable. Before we get into that, let me tell you about the Vault. Every video on this channel compresses weeks of research into 20 minutes. The Vault is where the full archive lives. Complete sourced recipe variations for all 4 methods. Historical document references you can look up yourself. Regional adaptation guides for different climates and altitudes. Troubleshooting for every common failure point. No filler, no upsells. Just the research. The link is in the description, but stay right here. Everything you need to execute these 4 techniques is in this video. The Vault is for people who want to go deeper. Now let us talk about why these methods actually work. Because if you understand the science, you can adapt them to anything. Every living bacterium on Earth needs the same basic conditions to survive and reproduce: moisture, a hospitable temperature range, and in many cases, oxygen. Every single one of these 4 preservation techniques attacks one or more of those requirements. That is not folk wisdom, that is established microbiology. Start with pemmican. When you dry meat at 70 degrees Celsius, you are reducing what food scientists call water activity. Water activity is the measure of available moisture in a substance. Below a certain threshold, bacteria cannot reproduce. They do not die. They simply cannot function. Then you saturate that dried meat with rendered fat. Fat is hydrophobic. It seals every surface. It creates an anaerobic environment, meaning no oxygen can reach the protein. You have now denied bacteria both moisture and oxygen simultaneously. That is why pemmican lasts decades, not days. Hardtack operates on the same dehydration principle pushed to its extreme. A 5-to-1 ratio of flour to water by weight, baked at 120 to 150 degrees Celsius for 2 to 4 hours. The goal is zero residual moisture, absolutely none. When you achieve that, you have created a substrate so inhospitable that even mold cannot colonize it. As long as you keep it dry, it is essentially inert. Salt curing uses osmotic pressure. When you pack meat in salt at a concentration of 3 to 5% of the meat's weight, the salt draws moisture out of both the meat and any bacteria present through osmosis. The bacterial cells dehydrate and die. The meat itself becomes an environment too saline to support microbial life. This is the same principle that keeps the Dead Sea lifeless. Scale it down to a pork loin and the science is identical. Lard-sealed canning combines heat sterilization with anaerobic sealing. You cook the food thoroughly, killing existing bacteria. You pack it into a sterilized jar. Then you pour molten rendered lard over the top, filling every gap, eliminating every air pocket. When that lard solidifies, it creates an airtight, oxygen-free seal. Clostridium botulinum and other anaerobic pathogens require specific conditions that a properly executed seal, combined with prior cooking, makes extremely unlikely. Here is the critical insight. All 4 techniques are variations of one principle. Deny bacteria moisture, oxygen, or a hospitable chemical environment. That is it. 4 methods, one underlying logic. And here is what should bother you. Your government still uses this science. FEMA maintains long-term food stockpile programs. NATO military rations are engineered using industrialized versions of the exact same dehydration, salt preservation, and anaerobic sealing principles. They kept the knowledge. They industrialized it. They just stopped teaching you the household version. The science never stopped working. What stopped was you being told about it. And that was not an accident. The global processed food industry is valued in the trillions of dollars annually. Its entire business model depends on one thing. You buying food again next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. Recurring revenue, quarterly earnings, shareholder expectations, every single metric that drives a publicly traded food corporation requires you to keep purchasing. Now consider what these 4 techniques represent to that business model. Salt costs almost nothing per pound. Flour is one of the cheapest commodities on earth. Lard is rendered from fat most people throw away. Basic meat cuts are affordable at any grocery store. None of these ingredients can be patented. None of these techniques require proprietary equipment. No recurring consumable purchase is generated. There is no margin opportunity. There is no subscription. There is no brand loyalty mechanism. A family that can preserve its own meat for 10 years does not need to buy canned meat every week. That is the equation the food industry cannot afford you to solve. Now look at what happened in sequence. After the Second World War ended, refrigeration was universalized across American households during the late 1940s and 1950s. The USDA progressively narrowed its preservation guidelines. By the late 20th century, lard seal methods and open kettle canning had been removed from official recommendations entirely. Home economics, the discipline that taught these skills in public schools, was systematically defunded across the United States from the 1970s through the 1990s. 3 documented facts: industry growth, guideline narrowing, educational defunding. Whether this represents coordinated suppression or the natural drift of an economy toward profit optimization is unknowable. I will not pretend to know which it is, but the outcome is identical either way. An entire generation lost the ability to feed itself independently, and an industry worth trillions filled the gap. If you think this kind of knowledge should be free and accessible, subscribe and share this video. That is how it spreads. Not through algorithms, not through advertising budgets, through people who decide that practical self-reliance matters more than convenience. The vault link is in the description for those who want the deep archive. Now stay with me. This next part is important. I promised you honesty, so let us talk about what can go wrong. Botulism is a genuine and potentially fatal risk. Clostridium botulinum thrives in anaerobic, low-acid environments. That is exactly what lard-sealed canning creates. If your food is not cooked thoroughly before sealing, If your jars are not properly sterilized, if your lard seal has air pockets, you are creating conditions where botulism toxin can develop. This is not a minor risk, it is a serious one. Salt curing can fail if your concentration is insufficient or if your storage temperature exceeds the safe range. Bacteria that survive a weak brine will multiply. Pemmican will spoil if the meat is not dried thoroughly enough before mixing with fat. Residual moisture trapped under tallow is a bacterial incubator. Hardtack is vulnerable to mold and insect infestation in humid storage environments. If moisture returns, so does biological activity. And none of these foods alone constitute a balanced long-term diet. They are preservation tools, not complete nutrition. These risks are real. They are also manageable. Every one of them is eliminated by doing the process correctly. That is what the next section is for. Pemmican. Start with the leanest meat you can find. Beef, venison, or bison all work. Cut it into thin strips no thicker than half a centimeter. Dry it at 70 degrees Celsius until it snaps cleanly when bent. No flexibility should remain. None. Grind the dried meat into a fine powder using a blender, food processor, or mortar and pestle. Render your fat separately. Beef tallow or bison tallow is ideal. Heat the raw fat slowly on low until the liquid separates from the solids. Strain through cheesecloth. Mix the meat powder and rendered tallow at a 1-to-1 ratio by weight. You can add dried berries for flavor and marginal nutrition. Press into molds or roll into portions. Store in a cool, dark place. Properly made pemmican will remain stable for years. Hardtack. Measure flour and water at a 5-to-1 ratio by weight. Add a small pinch of salt if desired. Mix into a stiff dough. Roll to 1 centimeter thickness. Dock the surface thoroughly. Every centimeter should be pierced. This prevents air bubbles that trap moisture. Bake at 120 to 150 degrees Celsius for 2 to 4 hours. The finished product should have zero flexibility. It should feel like a ceramic tile. If it bends at all, it goes back in the oven. Store in airtight containers in a dry environment. It will outlast you. Salt curing. Use non-iodized salt. This is critical. Iodized salt can produce off flavors and inconsistent results. Weigh your meat. Calculate 3 to 5% of that weight in salt. Coat the meat thoroughly and evenly. Place it in a non-reactive container. Store at 2 to 7 degrees Celsius. Curing time ranges from 7 days for thin cuts to 60 days for thick whole muscles. The meat will firm, darken, and develop a characteristic cured texture. You will know it is working by touch and smell. If anything smells foul, discard it. No exceptions. Lard-sealed canning. Cook your food completely first. Whatever you are preserving should be fully cooked and still hot. Sterilize your glass jars by boiling them for a minimum of 10 minutes. Pack the hot food into the sterilized jars. Render fresh lard and bring it to liquid state. Pour the molten lard over the food, filling all headspace completely. No air gaps, no bubbles. Tap the jar gently to release trapped air. Let the lard solidify at room temperature, then seal the lid. Store in a cool, dark location. Cleanliness and thoroughness are not optional. The science works if you follow the process. Cut corners in biology will punish you. 4 techniques. Exposed to centuries of proof, available to you right now, today, for almost nothing. In 1944, your government taught your grandparents how to feed themselves for years without a single trip to a store. By 1994, that knowledge had been stripped from schools, removed from official guides, and replaced by an industry that profits from your inability to do the same thing. The techniques still work. The science has not changed. The only thing that changed was who benefits from you not knowing. You now possess knowledge that was mainstream within living memory. Your grandparents knew this. Their parents knew this. It was not secret. It was not elite. It was Tuesday. And then an economy that runs on your dependence made sure you forgot. Send this to someone who deserves to know. Share it with someone who is tired of being told that self-reliance is extreme and convenience is normal. The next Vault release goes deeper into regional adaptation and advanced long-term storage strategies. The link is in the description. They did not hide one trick. They made an entire generation forget what self-reliance looked like.